Segment 5, Intellectuals and the Rest of Us. Again, intellectuals in society. There is a spontaneous demand from the larger society for the end products of engineering, medical, and scientific professions, but the demand for public intellectuals is largely manufactured by the public intellectuals themselves.
Yes.
Explain that. How do they manufacture demand for their own services?
Well, one thing is by making alarming predictions, offering solutions to our problems. And if they didn't do that, if Noam Chomsky had just kept on staying in linguistics, neither of us probably would have ever heard of Noam Chomsky. He would have been just as famous around the world among linguists, but nobody else would have heard of him.
What do you make of global warming?
I think it's a classic example of the need for crusades. Now, many people are shocked by these emails. I'm not at all shocked by them. I read the original UN study years ago, and I was just curious as to how they were going to deal with the question that the temperatures went up first, and then there was the increase in carbon dioxide.
Right.
Because you can't say that A causes B if B happened first. And so I read this, and I could see they were tiptoeing through the tulips in the way they phrased things and so forth. They couldn't confront that. And now we're finding out that they knew darn well they couldn't deal with all the evidence.
So it fits the pattern of a group of intellectuals, climate scientists who have a very narrow competency, suddenly proclaiming that there's a crisis, scaring the rest of us, thereby creating a demand for their services,
Yes.
not as climate scientists alone, but as a kind of high priestly caste that can tell us all how to live and save the entire
Yes.
planet, and in the meantime generate billions of dollars worth of government programs to fund their research initiatives. And so it's a racket.
Yes.
All right.
But again, you have to take account of the ability of human beings to rationalize. I'm sure there are scientists out there who believe some or much of what they're saying, and there are other scientists who believe the opposite. But the ones who are pushing global warming are doing their damnedest to make sure that those who believe the opposite don't get heard in the public.
So shouldn't there be some large-ish body of climate scientists who say the data really does suggest that we're headed into trouble here, but precisely because my saying so as a climate scientist will look like special pleading, we as a community of scientists should be even more careful about being completely transparent, pushing the data out to the public. They should overcome the hurdle that it looks like self-pleading. Why isn't that taking place?
There's no payoff to that.
All right.
Imagine yourself as an assistant professor in some department where your senior colleagues who are going to vote on your pay, among other things, have millions of dollars in grants handed out to promote global warming, and you say just what you just now said. And they'll say, this guy is incorrigible.
All right. Tom, what explains the exceptions? During the 1930s, intellectual after intellectual visits Russia and says, this is the land of the future.
Oh.
And Malcolm Muggeridge and a handful of others, but a tiny number of other intellectuals say, no, it isn't. Stalin is a barbarian. After the Great Depression, the entire economics profession is dominated by John Maynard Keynes.
Yes.
And then along comes Milton Friedman, and he just won't have it. What explains these exceptions among intellectuals who stand up?
That's for another book for somebody else to write. In the preface, I mentioned that I will have very little to say about Milton Friedman, not because he's not one of the most important people of the 20th century, but because he is such an exception to the general pattern that I'm trying to explain.
Okay.
I will leave it to someone else to figure out the exceptions.
All right, let me try to ask you to figure out one other exception. I'm going to go at you one more time on this one. Listen to this. Barack Obama holds degrees from Columbia and Harvard and taught at the University of Chicago. Thomas Sowell, who, like Barack Obama, emerges from the African-American experience in this country, BA from Harvard, MA from Columbia, PhD from Chicago, and has taught at Howard, Brandeis, UCLA, Cornell, and Amherst. What accounts for the difference in visions between Barack Obama and Thomas Sowell?
Oh my gosh! This is like trying to account for every sparrow's fall. I mean, we're
These
not.
are two pretty consequential sparrows.
Well, he is at least, but No, you can't. It's hard enough to account for general patterns. When you get down to the individual, you would have to know so much more than any of us has ever known, or will probably know for the next 1,000 years at least.
All right. Bill Buckley, quote, "I would rather be governed by the first 400 names in the Boston telephone book than by the faculty of Harvard," close quote. Very nice encapsulation
Right.
of the impulse you'd hope that most Americans would show, to
Yeah.
be suspicious of the experts. When Bill Buckley made that remark in the 1960s, roughly 9% of Americans held college degrees. Today, the figure is 29% and rising because roughly half of high school graduates go to college. The first 400 names in the Boston telephone book today are likely to include a large number of Harvard graduates and Harvard professors. The question here is simple. Are we becoming a nation of intellectuals?
I hadn't thought of that. It's a chilling thought. Because we're becoming a nation of people who are propagandized from elementary school right on through to the graduate school in a certain vision of the world. And only the ones who, for one reason or another, either experience or insight or whatever, leads them to say, wait a minute. Only those are the ones that we have to depend on.
Last question.
Yeah.
If you had a sentence or two to say to the cabinet assembled around President Obama, and this cabinet holds glittering degrees from one impressive institution after another, if you could beseech them to conduct themselves in one particular way between now and the time they all leave office, what would you say?
Actually, I would say only one word, goodbye, because I know there's no point talking to them. It's like asking me what would I say to the head of the mafia to get him to give up crime. There wouldn't be a thing I could say to him.
All right.
He would say, give up crime? I make 1,000 times what you do. Why should I give up crime?
Dr. Thomas Sowell, author of Intellectuals in Society, thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us.